Well, thank you for being here. This is the fourth time that I've shared some of the things we're doing at Qlik with this group. So I'm glad that you're all able to see the evolution and be a part of it on my side. My name's Nick Magnuson. I'm the head of AI at Qlik, and we're going to talk about what we're doing and what we've announced this year at Connect. I thought what I'd do, though, as we get into this is actually start with a bit of the why, what informs the strategy that we use at Qlik. And for me, this is a bit of, frankly, PTSD. Like, these are the same problems that AI has encountered when I was launching machine learning over a decade ago, right? It goes back to the data. It goes back to the wrong use cases. It goes back to the complexity of these systems. And I feel like we're seeing this movie play out yet again. And as Josh spoke at the very outset, part of our underlying business strategy is to try and address each of these pain points in the evolution of building these AI solutions so that you ultimately can do it better, faster, cheaper, and with more confidence and trust. Because what I do know is saying, hey, we use ChatGPT, that is not an AI strategy. An LLM is not an AI strategy. And I think part of the confusion, Guy, you touched on earlier in one of your questions is, we've got a lot of pressure from boards and from C-level executives that want AI injected into the business. And that's causing us to start to think about things that, may not actually represent a strategy, but is just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if it sticks. So at Qlik, our strategy is very much founded on there's a lot of different ways you can employ AI. In some cases, as Josh talked about, we've employed AI back to the 90s, and it's seen an evolution throughout that course. But one thing I can say is when we talk to customers, they all want to do something in AI, and oftentimes when you unpack what they're trying to do, it's not generative, it's not agentic. It actually might be traditional machine learning. It might be traditional analytics. It could be an automation. And that's why an entire platform that Qlik represents now is really important as we can solve a lot of these issues with technology that's been around for a long time. I want to talk a little bit about predictive because, Guy, you touched on this. We have customers now that are using this for a variety of use cases just within one particular industry. So within healthcare, we have customers using it for patient readmission. We have Appalachian Regional Hospitals, great example. They use predictive to predict when patients will not show, and then they take corresponding action to fill that would be otherwise lost revenue, and it's saving them tons of money. Very mundane use case, but yeah, you mentioned the BigSquid acquisition earlier. This product has now been in the product portfolio for 3 years. I'm proud to announce we're at 1 billion predictions that our customers have run off of that platform. That's 1 billion with a B. So it's a big milestone. And of course, last year when you were all sitting in a very similar room to this, we announced Qlik Answers, and that was our generative AI solution. Now at Connect today, or this week, we've announced that Answers is going Agentic. But I think the point here is our strategy helps our customers get to a point where they can use whatever AI matters, whatever AI is relevant for the use case, but be very much focused on the use case first, and then apply the right AI technique to solve that solution.
Like just one second.
Yeah.
Agentic AI. So, and feel free to contradict me if anything I say doesn't jive to you. But agentic AI is different from the other. One of these three is not like the other, right? Others, right? I think of agentic AI as an agent. Primarily an agent. It acts as an agent. It has goals. Those goals can change, and the fact that AI services from disparate types of any different type of AI service can be incorporated into the action of that agent. That's what makes it an agentic AI. We've had agents for a very, 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 very long time for many purposes. So there's a difference here in terms of whether we're talking about a predictive AI service that's incorporated into a platform, a generative AI service versus agentic AI. We're not talking, you don't run an agentic AI on an inference platform. So aren't you maybe a little bit sort of munging these together?
Yes and no. So being clear about the distinction.
Perfect answer, by the way. Yes and no.
Well, it's like if I was economics major, it's always yes and no, right?
Yeah.
So the truth of the matter is, like, you can solve a variety of different use cases using very different forms of AI. And as you point out, Agentic could use generative, and it could use predictive, and it could use a whole other slew of techniques and other solutions to solve that problem. What we have seen is when ChatGPT came out and there was all this noise about using Gen AI, it created a lot of confusion as to what could actually solve the underlying business challenge. And I would say a third of the time when we engage with customers, when Gen AI was the big rage, predictive was actually the more appropriate solution for the given use case that the customer's trying to achieve. And I think we're going to see the same thing with Agentic. Yeah, I need an agent to do that. Maybe not. Maybe so.
Well, business problem, that's a broad statement. It's not necessarily a problem. So I would see predictive or generative as providing an answer to a problem or to a question or to an issue. Agentic is more like addressing a goal or a set of goals, acting, taking action in order to carry out or support the carrying out of functions. Those can address business problems, business goals, support business initiatives, but that's a kind of a different meaning of the word problem. It's
a fair point.
Okay.
Fair point. Yep.
So I felt like you were going somewhere when you gave that example of the hospital with the predictive, right? Appointments made, appointments kept.
Yep.
A generative AI seems like that would be the appointment, how that appointment went, not having had read all of the files.
Yeah, or it could be, okay, we're having a no-show and the generative solution plugs in and starts a invitation to another patient to come to that appointment that we now suspect is not going to be shown.
So following that same, what's Agentic?
Then Agentic would be an agent who has the autonomy to make that decision and then outreach to the customer or the patient that, so like I said, the initial use case with Appalachian Regional was we just need to know if the people aren't going to show. Okay. Now we can evolve it to all these other things that are now coming online with the evolution of the space here. Yep. So what I think is probably the major announcement for us here at Connect is that Qlik Answers, leveraging this new agentic framework that we've built out, now can incorporate not only unstructured knowledge bases like you saw last year, and you can still use Qlik Answers to solve those things, by the way, but now we can also incorporate two new things. One is Qlik applications, so all that rich structured data that Qlik has had a heritage for 30 years can now be part of an assistant interaction where if I ask a question and the meaning of my question requires that we answer it through a query against a structured set of data, we can now do that. If I ask a question and it is more geared at a set of documents that we might have in a SharePoint site or in our email files, it can also answer that. And then the last part, and later this year, it will then be able to take corresponding actions that you give to that agent to then, okay, now that you've answered the question, take this corresponding action, send a Teams message, notify my team, update some record in our database or our CRM system, whatever that might be. And with that architecture that we've been talking about, the customer has the ability to design to whatever needs they need for that particular challenge that they that they have. So again, our connectors come into play, our API, OpenAI, API first development comes into play there where you can access all this via those things.
So Nick, when I hear all those things, like I think about a lot of things. I think about apps to start with, right?
Yep.
I think about Qlik application automation.
Yep.
I think about how you can trigger some of those things using Qlik application automation. And I think about how some customers are, I wouldn't say struggling, but they're still understanding how even that flow works, right? And this is a massive step on top of that. So the first part is like, how do you think customers are going to cope with that and how they're going to put that all together? And the second thing is, I think people for a long time have been trying to understand how unstructured and structured data is going to be interacted with in the future. And I think it's great to make a statement like we're going to solve it with Agentic, but one of the things that I see is that a lot of people are still used to using dashboards. And if you start throwing an agentic experience at them again, that is a massive leap, and especially when you take into account that Answers has only been around for a year. So what are your thoughts on that kind of chasm?
Yeah, and I'll flip to the next slide just to kind of illustrate that further. That is completely at the discretion of the customer. Now, if they want to just have a couple of apps or a single app as the point of interaction for a particular use case, they can design it as such. If they want just a knowledge base to be the point of interaction for, a great use case, some of the early Answers adopters are using it with field technicians that operate in the field. Typically, they carry a big manual around of like how to do things in the field. Now they just have an interaction point on a tablet, right? But they're only accessing knowledge bases because those people just need to have the knowledge of how to create, a solution, or to clean the surface, or to fix a air conditioner at a commercial site. You don't need necessarily structured data for that. But the point of all this is we give customers the flexibility to build it in the way they need in order to solve the problem that they're trying to go after. And what I'll point out on this slide is not only did we bring structured and unstructured together, we also made enhancements to both of those things. So if you guys are familiar with Insight Advisor, the very first form of our interaction with structured data through natural query, we now use LLMs to decipher the intent of the user question. And we do it at 4 times better than we did with Insight Advisor based on our benchmark tests. So not only are you interacting with structured data like you have been in the past, but that performance is much, much better because LLMs are much, much more intelligent than the old ways of doing things. With just in a year's time, Qlik Answers on knowledge bases, RAG as a solution, we're now doing hybrid search, we're doing advanced chunking, we're doing all sorts of different things, including graphs to understand the document structure and the entities and the relationship between it. If you ask a naive question that's not very specific, we can do a better job of answering it. So, these are all big things. Automations is the next layer in there. Our automations framework will need to include human in the loop type of things because we know people aren't going to put these things together and let them run on their own. They're going to have human in the loop kind of touch points. So that's an important aspect of just knowing where we are in the evolution of these technologies. And if you guys remember me, I love to show more than talk. So I want to get Kyle up here because I'm going to show what we're doing with some of these technologies that we announced here at Connect.
That's a question when I was coming up. You started by saying that customers sometimes are just jumping on the bandwagon, right? And you have a better solution than when maybe the newest whiz bang LLM thing, right? But having said that, then we've got all this new stuff and kind of bouncing off what you're saying that you're seeing from the field. It seems to me, just from interacting with the different things that it's just very obvious that it's kind of it's just LLM with something in front of it. It's not even an agent yet, but they only did it because they can. And it's so user and customer unfriendly. It's very much built and designed. And this has nothing to do with Qlik. This has very much to do with your customers. It's built to solve a need for the business versus to help their customers, which is what they think they're doing. They're actually trying to save money or gather information and pass it to somebody, but it's just a horrible experience for a customer. I just don't see this getting better. After what you said with people, they just went, look what I could do, and they do it, and it's out there, and they checked off a box that they have an agentic experience, and it's just really bad, and it's going to come back and bite them. So, how are you are you guys as Qlik, are you trying to advise people on, you don't need this, you just need predictive AI? Do y'all help your customers with that? And have you thought about saying, well, if you put that agent up there to just gather that information, your customers are going to hate you and it's going to fail? But are y'all advising on that too?
Yeah, and Kyle standing here next to me, he's one of those field people that is very acute at understanding what the actual intent of the customer is and what solution best solves for it. It is also why we determined when we wanted to help our customers start down the generative AI path last year, we weren't just going to give them an LLM out of the box and say, yeah, send your data at this LLM, it'll give you really good. No, we went with RAG because that's contextually grounded in the data that you give to the LLM. And so you can know that the answers are going to be correct. And if it doesn't know, as Stephen pointed out in our last podcast, it's going to say, I don't know. I don't have access to that information, which I got to tell you is really reassuring for me if I'm a business executive, knowing that, okay, there is a limit to what the LLM is going to do. So,
and that approach seems really consistent with Qlik's strategy overall when it comes to data as well. Not making stuff up seems intrinsic to the overall company.
Yeah,
I think it kind of goes into the bucket of saying it's enterprise grade, right? Because There's a lot of people who can go out and use their laptop to build something. It's not that hard to go build a RAG pipeline on your laptop if you're doing it for 5 documents, right? And then you're okay with answers that aren't going to look okay. But as soon as you start scaling that to thousands or tens of thousands of documents, and then thousands of users, you want to have the reassurance that it's not going to say things that it shouldn't say, right? Or even if it's giving the right answer, there are certain times when an organization doesn't want that answer given to certain questions, right? And then to go, to your question about the agentic stuff, I think Qlik is uniquely positioned to do some of this stuff right and to help advise our customers in that direction, in the sense that, Josh was earlier talking about some of the acquisitions we've made along the way. And they're really the 3 core pillars that go into building a good agentic experience, and Nick showed those, right? So the predictive components from the BigSquid acquisition, which became Qlik Predict, as we announced this week. We have the answers that we saw last year come out through an acquisition, which is the generative experience. And then we have a product that we call App Automations, which is a third-party API integration that allows you to do those actions. So when you were asking questions about the agent being something that can take action, we actually have the technology to make that possible. And I think that gives us quite an advantage into being able to do this faster and better than a lot of the competitors in the space. And so we're just really bringing those 3 products that we've had for years into a single experience to build those agents. And then, when someone asks a question that should be predictive AI, our agent will be able to build the model for them and give them a predictive answer rather than us having to, explicitly tell someone, oh, you should use predictive for this. It'll just be part of the answer, right? The answer to get used predictive because that was the right solution to solve that problem, right?
Question from a persona. After we've had a group of practitioners give you folks feedback on kind of the perception of Qlik in the market versus in their specific organizations. One of the things I'm struggling with is who's the champion within this expansion of capability for the Qlik portfolio of solutions, because the market and the competition is noisy. Salesforce, I'm seeing overlap for Agentforce. I'm seeing overlap for AWS native services. I'm seeing overlap for a lot of the cloud providers.
ServiceNow.
Everyone of building your own agents for internal agent platforms that do much of the capability that you folks are enabling. What's the Qlik, not just story, but who's the champion that's going to get you in front of the CTO to kind of raise above the noise?
Yeah, a couple different perspectives on that. So the first is, I think one of the value props for Qlik for years and to this day remains is that we are kind of an independent vendor in the space, right? You go talk to a lot of these other vendors, especially the hyperscalers, their goal is to get you to buy as many of their products and compute services as possible, right? And so one of the things that we've been able to offer for years is that independent connectivity to wherever you're doing your work today, whether that's, and most companies want to be diversifying their cloud portfolio, right? They don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. And so they're trying to spread it across. And so they need a platform that can really make it possible to bring in all those different data silos into one place to provide them kind of a central solution to solve these problems. So rather than you needing to tack on an agent to ServiceNow and to Salesforce and to all these different places, or heaven forbid, think about having to move all your data into Salesforce and the amount of development time that would require to do all that, because that's quite a big ask to move all your data into a Salesforce environment. And so how we kind of see our position is to be able to be the source where no matter where you're working today, you can grab and hook into all the places that your business is working already, and will be compatible with those different data silos, if you will.
I think that answers my question on kind of the value prop, but it is very difficult for a vendor not named, whatever their vendor is, to handle application development or application enablement, to now have a different vendor other than the incumbent. So the question is incumbency. How do you overcome incumbency for this net new space you're entering?
Yeah, and this I think is one of the realizations from our strategy discussions is this is it's going to be and is already a very big ecosystem, right? That's why AWS is here. And for us, it's got to be about knowing where we have strength in that ecosystem and where we do not. And so where we have strength is our heritage around data analytics and empowering agents to enlist that to create intelligence so these agentic systems can be operational across, as Josh talked about, multi-agent architectures. So are we going to build guardrails? No. AWS does that really well. Do they do security? Best in the world. Do they have regional plans and rollout? Yes, best in class. So that's why the partnership there is really good. We can bring our strength in analytics and data to an ecosystem where they can help us be, that's why I mentioned MCP and A2A and the agent marketplaces. That's where we feel like we can, participate, but in a much larger ecosystem that's require multiple vendors to do these things at scale.
So it becomes a go-to-market with partner. So if you're a common customer with AWS and they're already using Answers or something, it's, you know what, there's an easy button for this integration that you're going to do. Qlik has these extended capabilities, relationship. Let's do that, as opposed to you having to have to, build this story up and build the champions within the organization. This is just connecting the tissue.
Yeah, and as we, data sovereignty was brought up, it's a big topic. We can push Amazon in the direction that our customers need. They want to expand in different regions. So that's where, again, it's a partnership that has mutual benefits. It's just a part of knowing what our strength is in that ecosystem.
Yeah, I'll double down on that kind of strength in analytics in the sense that I see that's one, and when I'm out in the market, it's one of the areas that I see as another one of our advantages in this space is that a lot of the solutions that people are working on to deliver these kind of structured data with LLM solutions, it's a lot of text to SQL. So it's a lot of, they go ask these agents a question, and they're trusting the LLM to write a SQL query for them. And then they're pushing that down to a data warehouse. And there's a lot of inherent risk in that, right? Is it writing the right query? Is it doing the right joins? Is it using the right tables and fields? Is it using the way that we calculate that measure correctly? And so we have, over 40,000, 30,000? 40,000? We have over 30,000 customers that are already inside of Qlik today. And they've built these data models and applications where they've done a lot of that work, right? They've built the data models that define the dimensions, the measures, the glossary for the business terms. And so we get to just take that technology and put it on top of that associative engine that we've had for 30 years and allow people to kind of use that trusted foundation of structured data to have these interactions with the generative AI models. And I think that gives us a pretty distinct advantage over someone that's just, querying a data warehouse somewhat blindly, right? Okay, cool. So last year we introduced Answers. That experience was all about unstructured data, right? We brought in things like PDFs, HTML files, PowerPoints, and we were able to ask questions on that trusted unstructured content. The theme that we've announced this week is all around expanding that footprint into structured data, right? So it's about taking those applications that people have spent decades investing time into in terms of building data models and analytics and dashboards and making those accessible to the agents where they can retrieve answers to questions from either the unstructured document or the structured document or the structured data in their applications that they already have today inside of Qlik. And so what does that look like? So if I flip over here, this is what an analytics application looks like inside of Qlik. It's something where someone has a dashboard, they have built out their visualizations, different charts and graphs. There's lots of really good information in here, but we're getting more and more into a world where the expectation is to not have to go look at a dashboard and find the answer that you're looking for. There's a lot more of people coming into the market that expect to just ask a question in a chat assistant, right, on their phones, wherever they may interact with it and say, what is this metric? Or show me this, and to get an answer back that's reliable and answers their question directly rather than having to go find it. And so we're able to bring those experiences together now with the new version of Qlik Answers. So you can see here we have a combination of not only unstructured knowledge bases, so that's what we had last year when we introduced Qlik Answers, were knowledge bases where we brought in those trusted unstructured sources, but we've now added the application. So we're able to go and pull in those analytics applications that have all of this trusted structured data models and make those accessible to the agents that people are interacting with today. So what does that look like? I might ask a question in here that's really broad, right? What's affecting coffee sales, right? So that has a really broad implication, right? That an LLM could infer. So I might come in and just ask a really broad question like what's affecting coffee sales. There's multiple implications there. That might be some sort of structured data question that's saying, okay, show me the performance of sales of coffee. It might be things about, okay, do you have news articles or unstructured information that's related to what might be driving different trends in coffee sales. So you can see the agent was able to go and find a combination of things now with the new Qlik Answers. So the first is an unstructured type document, right? It went through a series of different source documents that were news stories, reports, published by analysts around what might be affecting tariffs, other kind of macroeconomic effects, and summarized those for me in a way that answers my question directly. What's new, though, is that it was also able to build a chart for me. So it went to my structured data model on coffee sales and kind of understanding the impact of what might be influencing that. It put together a chart for me. It gave me some insights from that chart. So it actually looked at that chart and that data and said, okay, here are some of the interesting things that are inside of that. And it summarized those for me in a couple of bullets. Even better is it showed me the assumptions that it's making. So we talked about that explainable AI concept. That's something that's really, really important for us at Qlik, right? Is not only giving you answers from these different AI solutions, but being able to help you in confidence that the answer is what you were looking for and using the right information. So under the assumptions, you can see it says, these are the fields that I used. Here's the filters that I applied, right? Here are maybe the different ways that I sliced and looked at this data. So it's able to break down how it was able to logically reason through what you asked to produce this visualization here.
So like, just to be super clear on that, is that chart like one of the charts from the app, or is that a generated chart based on the data model that the app?
Yeah, great question. It can be either or, right? So it might tap, if you have kind of a saved chart that is, part of your master items in the application, yep, it can retrieve that. But part of the power of what this is able to do is generate charts on the fly, so right?
What we're talking about here is faceless apps, really.
Yeah.
You can build faceless apps and start to use Qlik's capability to generate the things that you need.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Based on the output that you got, the answer that you got, how do you put it into a Word doc, or is it a copy button, or?
Yeah, so that's really that next phase in the agentic world, right? Which is, how do I take action on this, right? And so here in a little bit, I'll show you how we'll move into that phase of automation and application integration, where you can say something like, great, okay, turn this into a Word doc or a PowerPoint, or do something that's external actions. But that'll be kind of the next phase of the Qlik Answers agentic improvements. Yeah.
Before you move on to that, explain to me what a knowledge base is.
Yeah.
2-paragraph.
Yeah. So the way I think of a knowledge base and usually explain it to most people is it's my trusted source of knowledge, right? So rather than the general knowledge of the model, which is trained on the internet, right? Which there's all sorts of problems that can happen there. Information out of date, untrustable information. It is a knowledge repository that I have curated as an organization with trusted sources. So it might be, in this case, a combination of a data model that I've produced in my analytics team and or documents from my SharePoint sites, my S3 buckets, my Dropbox, that I've said, these are the right documents that people should be using to ask and answer their questions, right?
So you mentioned that one of the things that's new is the ability to go after structured. I don't want to jump ahead, but a knowledge base would also be able to access structured data.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you can see here in the content that we've broken down is there's that have been made available to this agent, right? So this agent can access 3 different knowledge bases. So it has basically 3 different knowledge repositories that someone has curated for me around these different topics, right? Some of them are around coffee tariffs. Some of them are around training for the employees in the coffee shop, right? Policies and manuals from HR. And then there's that 3rd row is an application. That's the structured data model that someone has already built for me. And it was this app that we just looked at here. So someone built this app, right? They took all the time to connect the data sources, to kind of make the right connections, to say, these are the measures and how you should define this metric. So when someone asks about sales, this is how it should be calculated, right? Someone's invested all that time and effort, and it's in this, and we can now expose that to the agent to get the right answers.
I want to go a little bit deeper, so I understand. Is that knowledge base and what they've built, is it based on, say, a SQL Server database, some Azure source, an Oracle database, a series of flat files being accessed as CSVs? Is that what is the data model?
Yeah, it can be any of the above. So,
Any of the above.
yeah, so we have at Qlik, we have something called the Associative engine, our proprietary data modeling technology that brings together those disparate data sources. So
that Talend, as we've heard,
Talend can be used as part of that. The Associative engine's been around since when Josh was talking about the 90s. That was our core technology that the company was started on, right?
Okay.
And that's been around for 30 years.
that makes it clearer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Super important question. Like all of the questions.
All of yours, anyway.
You said it. We asked a very basic question, but this is the challenge of using LLM as the interface to really rich data on the back end. If I ask that question 3 times, I might get 3 different answers. So I love the fact that we have explainability, so I know what the answer is based off of. How do we direct customers to ask better questions?
Yeah, great question. So one of the other things we've introduced in the new Qlik Answers is this concept of something called guidelines, right? So a guideline is the ability for you to add a couple things. One is to kind of introduce additional instructions to make sure that when someone asks certain topics or different things, to continuously go down the right path, right? So maybe you want to you know that someone might ask the question 3 different ways, and you want to make sure it goes down the right path every time. You can provide those guidelines to the agent to do that. You can also load in here, you can see number 3 is example questions, right? So you can kind of seed these example questions that help the agent to be able to provide the right responses consistently across the content. And then you can apply these guidelines to different parts of your content. So you might say these guidelines apply to the structured data components. These guidelines apply to the unstructured knowledge repositories, right? So it allows you to really kind of get in and add an extra layer of protection to get that enterprise grade consistency and quality in the answers that are coming out of the agent. Okay?
And is that like an additive thing in terms of what already exists with Qlik Answers? Yeah. Because obviously if you built something with Qlik Answers APIs to this point, it just appeared in Qlik Application Automation not too long ago, and you don't want to be like ripping all that out and starting again with a new architecture. So how does that sit?
Yeah, this is all just incremental improvements to the Qlik Answers offering that's already there today. So honestly, it came from a lot of feedback that we got in the market from our Qlik Answers customers. Is they said like, look, great, this is solving a lot of our problems, but there are these fringe cases in which we want to be able to provide additional instructions, right? Because we want it to act a very specific way when someone brings up this topic or brings up this conversation point. We want to route it to structured data or to unstructured sources to answer that question. So this provides that kind of extra layer of customization that some of the customers we have today are asking for.
So just to be crystal clear on that, if I've got a knowledge base that has 12 documents in it that has correlated a lot of my unstructured stuff, I can drop an app in there and then connect that.
Absolutely.
That's the type of process that we're talking about.
Yep.
I was super impressed with the way Qlik Answers was a drag and drop experience to begin with. So I think that's really important to continue that paradigm moving forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
From my perspective, we see a lot of, especially the hyperscalers, building from their starting point is the developer, right? And then they kind of back into a end user friendly experience. And from my perspective, it's not always the best. We kind of work the opposite way, right? In that we like to build for the business user first, and then we add the kind of, as those users start adopting it, we start to add the more advanced capabilities over time to make it more available to those who have edge use cases to kind of get more advanced in the product, right? So I think that's one of our kind of unique offerings, is that when the business comes to us and say, hey, we're trying to do this, we just don't have the resources to develop it internally with hyperscaler services or with APIs or all these other things, they're able to use our product out of the box because it's so user-friendly and intuitive for those use cases.
I think it's big for the question I asked before as well, because like that's what I'm really seeing is like you can build it, you got the pieces and we can do it technically, but it's not friendly to the business user case. It's just some of them are not, and it's going to have a really opposite effect on what they were trying, what we're trying to do with AI in general.
Yeah, and it's really some of the stories that you've heard this week around from our customers that you'll in this Qlik Answers product is those kind of stories, right? Of like, I was unable to do this for years because the services that were available were designed for architects and engineers and developers, and I'm a smaller organization that's been trying to do this without the resources, and then Qlik brought me that let me do this out of the box in a matter of hours, right, rather than weeks or months even to get some of these products out the door. Okay, great. So that's kind of the agentic approach, and then I promised you we kind of evolve into what is the next phase, which is the action piece of an agent, right? So again, fortunately, we have already had the components that make it possible to take action in third-party systems with these agents. And so the next evolution of Qlik Answers will be the ability to say, okay, great, you've given me the answer I'm looking for. I found my answer either from structured or unstructured data. Now I need to actually do something with it, right? I don't want to get, if you will, with this answer you've given me. I need to be able to send this as a Teams message to someone. I need to generate a PDF that I can send in an email somewhere, or maybe I need to create a event in Salesforce, right? Or update a Salesforce opportunity. So with Qlik App Automations, we have the ability to integrate with hundreds of different third-party tools and APIs. And again, as usual with the Qlik experience, it's all drag and drop. So you can see it's a completely codeless users able to configure all of these different interactions. In this case, I have an example where I have a Teams channel set up. So inside of Microsoft Teams, you're not going to bring all your users into Qlik for questions. You need to be able to put these agents in the hands of the people who are using other tools in their day-to-day operations. So with, let's say, Microsoft Teams, there's a channel where people want to just ask the question that they have about, whatever you've built your agent around. In this case, we're monitoring the Teams channel for a new message to come in. We're interacting with that agent in a series of kind of automation steps, and then we're sending a reply to their message, right? So I might come in and just show you this working, right? If I come in and go to this Teams channel and say, ask a question, I'm just going to ask the same one I asked about 10 minutes ago, and just post that in the Teams channel, and then I come over and we'll just manually trigger this automation, but we can schedule that to set off when someone asks a new question. And so it's going to go through those series of steps. It's going to work through the different APIs required to take that action as an agent, that autonomous nature. And then when I go back to Teams now, I have a response to the question. So it went to that trusted structured data source, right? I asked the question, how many people have registered for Kyle's session? It's a very ambiguous question, right? If I went and asked that to just an open LLM, it would be like, I don't know who's Kyle. What are you talking about, right? But because I've connected information around the Qlik Connect breakout sessions for this week's breakouts, and then asked that question, it came back and said 50 people have registered for the session featuring Kyle Jourdan. And I just want to go ahead and say the capacity was 50, so it's a sellout. Okay? Just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. But so I can ask that question, and then just like when we have in our Qlik Answers experience, I literally flew yesterday from Wales. So I've been in Wales for
really
2 weeks.
fast right then. That's a frightening demo in that you're representing as yourself in the demo.
Yeah. Well.
And so the implication being is that one of the company I used to work for, we did the same thing for a couple people in product management. They created their own little people.
Yeah.
And the thought was like, well, Don doesn't sleep now. Don's available 24/7, 365. Beat him up all you want for questions, because product management's product management. Is this the intent, or was it, no, this is just easier to do the demo this way with my name?
Well, I like to make it as real as possible, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I want you to know that I'm not using generic demo content here. I'm making stuff that's specific to me or to the people in this room, right? And so the only reason I've been able to be in Wales for 2 weeks on vacation leading into Qlik Connect is because I've now automated myself.
Yeah. There's a I'm not sure if you remember the Dilbert one where it was Wally and he starts basically sending emails from the past several years and no one knows that it's.
So I have a that actually leads to a question I have. So what it seems like there's also another thing to consider is agentic life cycle, right? Because after Qlik Connect, this isn't going to matter anymore. It's just a bunch of extra things hanging out in Teams and hanging out on Qlik. So are there any suggestions on how to make sure the information that the agent is addressing is constantly current? Is there, are there suggestions and advice you give to your customers on how to update or delete the apps when they're no longer necessary?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that each of these progressions in AI is uncovering, and it's also why we happen to have, through like the talent acquisition and some of the other acquisitions that we've made along the way, brought in a lot of data quality and governance components to the platform. And that's important because all this does is open a can of worms around data quality and governance, right? So when we introduced Qlik Answers, we saw this huge wave of customers saying, oh boy, I just figured out that all my unstructured data is full of out-of-date documents with the wrong answers, the same name document 10 different times, right? And they have different information in them.
Blackboard.
You're triggering me right now.
Yeah, and so because it's exposed to all these things, again, we just happen to be in a really fortunate position that we've made strategic acquisitions over the years that give us the ability to help address those concerns. And so as part of the kind of the data integration platform, we have the ability, and we've introduced these concepts around AI trust scores, where you can continuously monitor your data sources to know how ready they are for AI, how much the information can be trusted. So all those same concepts apply. We're just helping people open that can of worms. Fortunately, we have, I don't know what a good analogy here, we have something to put on top of that can of worms, or at least to cast the worms out and catch some fish with it. So
if a Qlik customer wants to build their own agent, can they do that within the Qlik framework, or should they better go to a third party and build their agent?
I think most people would be able to say that they can use the Qlik Answers experience to build those agents between the structured and unstructured integration now, and then the ability to interact with third-party APIs. And again, if we don't have it in our pre-built connector drop list here, we have open REST API blocks that you can drop in. So you can call any API that you want. Even if we haven't built an easy drag and drop connector where you can just drag the action onto a canvas here, you can specify your own API. So maybe a company has their own API they've built internally and they want to be able to interact with that API. They can do that directly from this experience. So I think people can get about 99% of the way there. There's always fringe cases where someone says, oh, I want to customize a little more. We can provide a lot of the support services in the background to kind of help get that from A to B faster. But I think we'll find a lot of people can solve a lot of their problems.
What's your strength in the versioning? So you have a history tab. So is the history indicative of like you're taking a snapshot of the environment with all the relevant elements, or where does a backup and recovery begin and end?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much any of the products that you see here can be versioned out, right? So not only can you see logs to see what's been running and the executions, but in our Qlik Predict platform, in Answers, in automations, you're able to kind of revert back to previous versions, kind of see how things have evolved over time. So you can always kind of manage those all this AI stuff is very iterative, right? You're constantly going to be evolving it and changing it, and you might want to go back to version 3 to begin version 6, right? So there's always that ability to kind of create that timeline as necessary.
Thank you.
As much as I love to keep talking about agents all day, like Nick said, a lot of the time the agentic and generative talk actually reroutes back to predictive AI, right? In the sense that this is the right solution to the problem. And so some of the things we've introduced over the past year that have really evolved the space are almost, I don't want to call them boring, but it's really the groundwork required to do predictive AI right. And that's around data quality and preparation and transformation. And so we've introduced these no-code data flows. So the ability to 80% of data science work is around the data prep, right? And getting the data right for the machine learning and the model training. So we've introduced this concept of data flows where you can quickly build the data sets you need to build your machine learning model. So you can see that's completely no code, but it uses the power of the Qlik engine that we've had for 30 years and our proprietary Qlik script language in the background. So what's happening behind the scenes is we are generating Qlik script for you, and you can even pull that Qlik script up and customize it if you want to. But just dragging and dropping these blocks on here does all that powerful Qlik script generation for you. And then that gives you the ability to pull into a experiment, a Qlik Predict experiment. And then we've also just recently announced the table recipes concept, right? Which, let's say I did my data flow and I realized, oh boy, I got all these columns here with NA values in them and I need them to be numbers, right? For my model to work correctly. It's really easy with table recipes to come in and say, you know what? I just need to do a replace on those values. If I can click and say, place all those NAs with zeros. And then just like that, I've transformed that data set to have the right data structure for me. As you can see, all those NAs have turned into zeros now. So it allows me to quickly iterate over data sets to get to the right version faster without having to kind of keep going back to my data warehouse, updating my SQL query and kind of doing that back and forth. It's just in a GUI where you can make quick updates and quick improvements. And then the last thing that I'll touch on here that is exciting for us, and the next big improvement that we are bringing to the Qlik Predict platform is the introduction of time series capability. So we've heard a lot of people asking for the ability to do native time series modeling with their data, because as much as we want to preach the benefits of predictive AI, a lot of times it goes back to someone saying, I need to do sales forecasting better, right? And really the best way to do sales forecasting is to use time series models. And so with this, we'll be introducing a lot of deep learning algorithms that will be part of the Qlik Predict platform. And so you'll have the ability when you're configuring an experiment now to quickly select that you want to use a time series. It will ask you what your date column is, and then it will allow you to kind of group your data by the different groups that you may want to, so it might be like by store or by department if you're doing a sales forecast. And then we'll train some deep learning algorithms to build a true native time series model. So that will be a capability that we have in the.
And that model that you're referring to would be your model or someone else's model?
It will be trained on your data. So it'll become your model for your data and your sales or whatever your target is that you want to predict.